welcome to Saturday night's live show. And tonight is going to be a really fabulous show. My conversation is with Clif from Half Past Human. Now he's going to be here sharing with us his latest Alta reports. In my opinion, these are the most intriguing ever reports. Now he's also going to be here for the full 2 hours tonight, and there's a ton of information that we're going to be sharing with you tonight. And he is also going to be talking about some of the information that he has shared via email reports to all of you about some of the new things with the crop circles. However, I will tell you is we will be getting to those towards the end of the show, and we will be having him talk about it as well as some of the time off that he's going to be taking. And we are here with my mysterious guest, Clif. Welcome to the show, Clif.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And it is marvelous to have you here, and I'm going to share with everyone, for those of you who may have missed the opening, I'm actually not in the studio tonight. I'm in a remote location in Columbia, Missouri, so we're working under a little bit of a kind of adverse conditions here, so if anything goes awry, please understand that we will make everything right, so bear with us in case there is something that happens to the process of the links or the hookups or whatever may happen here. But in the meantime, Clif has been very busy. You've been making some announcements, and as you heard me say to the audience, Clif, is that we're going to get to that towards the end of the show because a lot of people have already been asking about the crop circles and some other things that the announcements have been making over the last couple of weeks, and we promised them that we would, share what little information that you do have and kind of give, fill people in as to what's going to be happening and all that.
Yeah, it's quite intriguing, and we need to save a little block of time for it, sure, yeah.
Yeah, we will, and we definitely will save a block of time so that we can get into that, because that is really a pretty phenomenal thing there with the crop circles, and I have my own theories on it, so I might be able to express some of those with you as well tonight. It'll be kind of fun.
Sure.
So anyway, as we're talking, one of the things that I was talking to you about before we got on the air tonight was the latest reports is that it seems like to me, in my opinion, is that from, just like say a year or two ago when I first started getting your reports and I had you on, the language and the information that's coming from the reports is vastly different than where it used to be. And this latest set of reports has really become extraordinarily intriguing. It's like reading more into it than what is actually there. It's absolutely almost tangible to me, that the change that's went on with the latest stuff that's come up.
Well, it should be understandable, though, if we stop and think of the changes that we've all undergone in these last couple of years and the impact on us, because all the reports really do is reflect the leading edge, if you will, the far edge of the bow wave of that change. So it would actually be quite surprising if it had not changed, given what we've all gone through in these past couple of years. But a very good catch, nonetheless. It's nice to notice those large trends.
And they are, and they're like I said, for me, they were almost tangible. It's just, it's been really pretty amazing as to watch how the language has changed, how it's almost like the language is taking on an energy of its own, and there is more layers to the language than just as what is coming out.
And
there's
that's
more depth, I guess, for the lack of a better way of saying that.
No, that's actually a good way to sort of put it, is that it's sort of like condensed, boiled down to a thick syrupy mass, so you see the sheen on the top, but there's layers below that as well. And
yeah,
a lot of it has to do with the pressures that have been put on us by the changes of the last couple of years. It's quite palpable, and so we're seeing it reflected in everybody's language. In fact, I'm sure everyone that watches television has repeatedly seen the word recession, and in times like these, and tough economy and new economy, all these words that didn't exist on television a year ago. And
right.
So they're just simply trying to keep up, so to speak. And the edge of language is way beyond what television can accomplish, although they're, probably no more than 2 or 3 months out from the actual shape of how the language is going. So it is understandable, and it's nice, actually, to see the palpable change in the reports. It kind of validates the process.
Absolutely. So speaking of that, let's go ahead and start with the Part 0 of the Alta 1309 report.
Sure.
Because that starts out, first of all, with the global coastal phenomenon. So let's begin with that, and we're going to kind of go through these, each of these reports and try to take a few minutes and spend on a little bit on each of the the topics within each of those reports, starting at part 0 and kind of hitting some of the highlights. So I'm going to let you kind of start out with the global coastal phenomena, because it usually takes on a life of itself, as you well know, our conversations about them.
Yeah, and it is a huge subject inside a huge entity, and it occupies a lot of the lexicon and the accrual bits that are coming on in over these past few months. The whole, it's part of maybe even a larger trend. If, we're thinking about it this way, that the global coastal event or phenomenon is going to rear its head in a very visible way, which is to say within the global media stream sometime after, say, 14th of May, so mid-May or so on. It'll last about 5 months or so. We're now seeing precursor language describing actual physical events that fall within the category of what we had described for the global coastal phenomena even a number of years ago. For instance, the rising of new land off of Tonga in a spectacular way with that volcano. Those kind of things. All of these things are, for instance, all the undersea volcano activity recently and the earthquakes and so on are shifting the undersea currents, which are causing impact on the oceanic currents as a whole, causing problems with the coast. We're also getting new property emerging here and there, which is pushing the waters about and rising sea levels in a rather spectacular fashion. And as that is occurring, we're seeing that the disinformation campaigns are putting out a steady stream of, no, you're wrong, it's only 3 millimeters a year, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, we're sure that the global coastal phenomena is underway because we have whole nations that are disappearing in many parts of the world that were very low-lying island countries. We're seeing new property emerge that pushes the oceans even further. The oceans are heating up en masse. And now we have the powers that be through their minions in the press telling us that we're wrong. That's always a good sign that we're actually correct. And then we're also seeing scientific evidence that's presented, which borders on something that might fall out of the rear end of a cow, that says that, oh, yes, the oceans are heating up, and the reason the bottom of the ocean is so hot relatively is because the warm water from the sun is sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And it's like, wait a second, no, that's not really making a whole lot of sense here. But what's important for us is to watch the language that they're using to try and impress these ideas across. And that's going to really ramp up.
Well, and I will tell you is that all of this stuff that's coming out in the news, in my opinion, is just another form, another tactic. All these different ideas, they're all forms and tactics of trying to keep people in a state of confusion. And somebody is asking a question relative to that: is how high should we expect the sea level to rise? Again,
you go right to the point: confusion. We don't know. Our data says global coastal event that will impact in a, I want to say this very carefully and precisely, in a tidal fashion. Now, not tidal wave like they have on TV, but the slow incoming creep of the tides. And that effect will cause some level of disruption to the point of an increasing diaspora. Bear in mind that we work this way. The Internet is filled with vast quantities of numbers, so anytime numbers come through in our linguistic structure, we usually just throw them out and discard them, because numbers are generated either by processes or by certain neural pathways that repeat the numbers because that intrigues the monkey mind. So, for instance, I have this dear friend, George Ure, who runs Urban Survival, where we frequently post, some little public announcements from the WebBot reports. Anyway, George, he's an economist, so he can't really help it, but he's fascinated by numbers. And as soon as you involve numbers in the process, you're talking with George's monkey mind, and you're not really communicating with George. So we don't have a number, for instance, that comes up. It's not like prophecy where it says, it's going to rise 6 feet. What we have is a series of linguistics that describe the effects of the impact of the global coastal phenomena and the fact that it's a 20-year process as well. And what we're going to see here over this year is the first opening, of the orchestra, getting all tuned up, everything getting ready to go. It'll last for about 5 months, cause some level of disruption, sort of fade from consciousness a little bit, and then pick up later on. And it'll just become part of life at that stage. So we have a process that describes this, where it's going to be a real big deal, and then we're all going to kind of get used to it. And that the language sort of reflects that. that it just becomes, oh, ho-hum, yet another challenge about a year and a half from now.
Okay, and so that answers, I think, this question that we just had too, Clif. It says, does Clif have a confidence interval or a likelihood statistic for the global coastal phenomenon or any WebBot prediction? I think you just answered that question for that individual.
Yeah, see, and it's the numbers issue. You know, I'd love to have numbers that were valid, and we get them rarely, and they come through so rarely because they have to come through in a text fashion out of our archetypes. And a very rare case that we had was when we saw 300,000 knocked back to a previous, or 300,000 killed in a nation knocked back to a previous age prior to the Banda Aceh quake. And that time we discussed the 300,000. But no, we have no legitimate numbers. Then if you can go on out, you can look at what the potential is. You find some absolutely alarming things. For instance, if you go and validate our work and check out what NOAA and NASA and all these other individuals might guesstimate as to the amount of fluid change in the ocean relative to something like the Greenland Glacier or the West Antarctic ice sheet going, you see some figures that go as high as 353 feet, I think, if all the water that's currently locked up as ice were to melt. But those are kind of spurious, I think, because they're based on everything staying the same except for the amount of water coming out. And so here's what occurs. If the West Antarctic ice sheet were to shift, the continent upon which it is pressing down will also shift, causing changes in the ocean that may, in fact, as far as we know, create a big hole and drain a lot of the water, and therefore the coastal phenomena might be the water rushing away from the coasts. And the same level of language could accommodate either that or water coming in. It's much more probable that water would come into the coast and we'd have some level of permanent flooding, loss of beaches, loss of ports, and so on. But nonetheless, the language is kind of indeterminate. It could go either way.
Right. Well, and that to be said, you know, if you're talking about, you know, the flooding and all the water to be flooded, then and nothing else would change. It's kind of, when you think about that whole idea, that whole premise, that can't happen.
Correct. So their guess is to 353 feet over existing sea level begs all kinds of questions. Are they talking about before or after the coast collapse due to the extra weight and so on? So
blah blah blah. Right. Yeah. Right. And so right now that's just a scare tactic in that sense.
Correct. So I don't buy into the numbers in any event.
And as I remember, and I was looking through this report because we have a question that says, ask us if there's going to be any specific areas that are impacted to a greater degree. And as I remember reading this report, it just kind of gives kind of a guesstimate, doesn't it? Like the East Coast, West Coast kind of a thing.
You're correct.
UK.
Yeah. And but they're all relatively predictable. And again, they're assuming that everything stays the same, other than the waters inrushing. And so we have, for instance, the idea that, you know, we're going to have flooding in the Chesapeake Valley or Chesapeake drainage area, and we're going to have impacts on the Caribbean coast to Florida, impacts that if they breach certain levees would flood large parts of California. Not to say it's going to go into the sea, but rather the sea is going to go into it, and so on. But some of the more non-obvious parts of the global coastal phenomena relate to the huge amounts of water that are being put into the atmosphere.